Welcome into the Saints Insider podcast for Wednesday, May the 8th. May the 8th, right? I got that right?
You did.
It is another week of the offseason as we go through here on Saints Insider. Matt Paris, I'm Zach Ewing, that's Luke Johnson, and Jeff Duncan. Lots to talk about today. Want to remind you to subscribe to the Saints on NOLA.com YouTube channel. Hit the share button, like button, notifications, all that good stuff. And keep it locked here all off-season long as we stick with you. At least one show a week. We got a schedule coming out next week. We'll talk about that. Lots of other stuff to talk about. Headline for today, I was able to speak with Derek Carr this morning. First time we've had kind of a one-on-one chat in the off-season. And Derek said a lot of interesting stuff. So let's kind of dig right into that. I think first and foremost, guys, he seemed... I don't know if feisty is the right word, but he seems like he is ready to respond to some of the criticism that he received over the last season here.
Energized, maybe?
Yeah, energized. Yeah. He's certainly not backing down from it.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously the first season didn't go as planned, and I think there's been a lot of criticism here locally, and probably a lot nationally as well for the way that first season went. And I think I would, if it were me, I would want the quarterback to respond in that way. To be like, okay, yep, wasn't good enough. I'm going to show you what I can do. And I think there's, if this line is even just able to be functional, I think there's a chance with the new offense and the weapons they have around him that he's much better in year two. But I think there's a lot of things that have to go right in order for that to happen. And it sounded like listening back to the interview, it sounded like he's excited to kind of prove some people wrong, but we'll kind of see if they're able to get that out of him.
Yeah, I mean, he obviously expectations are lower, and he spoke on that, Matt, saying, I kind of like it when expectations are lower. We can go prove people wrong, things like that. One thing he also said that made, and we have the quote up right now that says it was a fight to make everything seem normal. And I think he maybe underestimated how difficult it was going to be to come into a new building and a new team and a new situation and have that immediate success.
Right, and considering the expectations of you arrive, you're supposed to be this huge upgrade over Andy Dalton, and you're supposed to lift them to the playoffs. That didn't happen, and we saw the backlash that Derek Carr got last season. I mean, anytime you just tweet out a Derek Carr quote, your social media, like my Twitter replies, your Twitter replies, like they all just were, I'm going to avoid cursing on this pod again, but they were very negative to Derek Carr, and I think he has some work to do to kind of win back those fans, but he also doesn't. What's interesting with what Derek Carr does is he says he doesn't pay attention to things, but yet he says enough to where at least he's attuned to some of those comments.
He's aware of that they're out there, I think.
And so, I think the biggest thing from that interview is you could just tell that the expectations are different now than they were a year ago, and he's kind of feeding into that.
There's obviously one way. There's really only one way for Derek Carr to turn that around. It's not to say a bunch of stuff that people like. It's not to not be caught by cameras yelling at teammates. It's to win football games and to play well winning football games. That's the only way it's going to turn around. If he does that, people are going to love him here. It's going to completely reverse. We've seen it happen with multiple players. But if he's kind of the face of them being a mediocre team as they have been the last couple of years, and he's still doing the other stuff, and he's still saying stuff in press conferences that people are just going to pick on because they're mad at him, then it's just going to be a lot of the same. Like he has to perform at a high level, and they have to win because of him.
Yeah, and I think last year it felt like, the whole mantra of the organization was that he didn't have to carry the team. Remember? I mean, that was the whole thing. He said that last year. I can just fit in because this team's good enough around me. Well, I don't think that was true. And I think actually when he started playing better in the year, unfortunately, the rest of the team wasn't playing better. So it almost felt like early in the year when he wasn't playing very well, the rest of the team was playing okay. They just couldn't get aligned with his play and the rest of the team. But you can tell he's more comfortable now. I mean, the way he spoke in that interview, and with comfort comes confidence. And I think he's a little more confident. And I think probably that's by design, not only from himself, but also from the organization. This is going to be your team. We've kind of fashioned this offense now. We brought in a whole new staff. This is your team now. Take control. So I don't think it's by accident the way he's talking.
Yeah, we'll post the interview and we'll of a story this weekend. You can see a lot of the comments and more in full of what Derek said. He didn't want to go on video. He's very conscious of his schedule, and it's like, hey, we have 10 minutes. I don't want to set up a video. Let's just sit down and talk. So that's the way we did it. One thing you mentioned, Jeff, is he played better later in the year, and we've talked several times before where, oh, hey, if you take out those games where he right after injury, boy, his numbers look like a lot better. They're Pro Bowl type numbers. And you don't get to do that. I brought that up with him, and his response was about his health. That really, after the Green Bay game in Week 3, he was not healthy the entire year. He did not feel healthy, particularly in the middle of the year. He even said something about having to use chemistry to feel better at the end of the year, that meaning either he was getting injected with something or taking pills or both just to get through games. And then he said after the year, he didn't throw a football until March. That's how bad his shoulder felt.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting that it was that bad. But look, we'll see. I mean, it was. Look, I know he was healthier, and I know that played a part. But there were so many other things that he needed to do better than just that. And so I want to see where that goes going forward. I mean, he didn't get a lot of help. I mean, we've talked about the running game on here. They've got to have a better running game to take that burden away from him. They didn't have a running game at all really much last year, and that's obviously a point of emphasis with Dennis Allen and this entire organization. That's why Clint Kubiak and this staff is here. Now let's see if they can do it, because I do think if they get better running the ball, which I can't imagine they're going to be worse, that he's going to play a lot better.
Yeah, and I mean, Derek knows that. I mean, the line he always uses when we're talking about this stuff is people don't care. He knows people don't care about his injury, and that like, look, if you're going to be out there, you're out there, and your performance is what we're going to grade you on, regardless of how you're feeling. But like, I do think that that it was pretty clear that by the end of the year, when he was feeling a little bit better, even if he wasn't 100%, I mean, he's playing pretty good ball.
Yeah,
something like 14 touchdowns against 1 interception maybe in the last 5 weeks of the season. Passer rating north of 100. Saints played pretty well in those games. I think went 4-1 to close the season. So like, it is there, and that he can be a good, highly functioning quarterback if everything's going right around him. It's like Dunk is kind of alluding to. It's, can they get the other kind of support systems in this offense to kind of work together to support Derek Carr, and everything should be geared towards supporting the quarterback regardless of who it is, because that's how you get high level offense in the NFL. We'll see. I mean, we'll see. I think I'm a little bit more optimistic than some. Maybe it's just kind of my nature, but I think with this new offense, like as we've talked about all offseason, it's geared towards maximizing quarterbacks. And I think if they can maximize the best aspects of Derek Carr's game and kind of minimize the worst parts of it, I think he can be a pretty solid starting NFL quarterback.
It's interesting, Matt, because like when you look at grading Derek Carr's 2023 season, and you obviously, we're only looking at it closely for half the year, but it's hard because he was so good at the end, and you can point to health and say, yeah, it's health. But he's never been all that consistent in his entire career with the Raiders. I mean, so you have to sit there and say, well, can he maintain that level even if he is healthy for a full season? And then, of course, there's the obvious question of whether the Saints can keep him healthy for a full season.
Well, you would hope that the offense builds something into that. Jeff mentioned the run game, having more play action, just taking the ball out of his hands. The thing that really stands out to me about those last 5 weeks, and even like the second half of the season, is he was the most accurate quarterback in the NFL. And, he wasn't, I don't think, pushing the ball down the field as often as he was those first 7 weeks, where you think about a Pete Carmichael offense, those deep shots down the field. It just seemed like he was very determined where he wanted to get the ball. And I think that's something that this offense maybe has something built into it. But you could tell me, I wouldn't be surprised if the first few weeks of this, depending on who they play and whatnot, like, I think it's going to take some time for them to get used to this new offense. I know that this is what the spring is for and everyone to get on the same page, but we've just seen time and time again new offenses come into place. They have to work through some kinks. And, Derek Carr, he's now 33 years old. I do think we'll see these ups and downs continue next year, because I just think that's kind of who he is at this point. But to your guys' point, yeah, there are things the Saints can do to make him much better. And hopefully, they think they found that, and we'll see if they're right.
On the offensive line and protecting him, I asked him about the draft, about Taliesin Fuanga being the number 1 pick. He was obviously pleased with that. I think we all could see why he would be, and why he would be, pretty ticked off if they hadn't taken a tackle.
Yeah, like the interaction was actually funny because like you were talking to him, he's like, yeah, I just told him like, hey, whatever you guys think is best, and then like as the pick is coming up, he's like, I hope it's a tackle. Because the underlying idea being they have a lot of instability there.
I mean, like, who were their tackles last year? Trevor Penning, we've talked ad nauseum about this. Trevor Penning is a huge question mark. Andrus Peat's not in the building. Ryan Ramczyk may never play football again. They obviously needed a tackle. But then I led into, well, how confident are you in the offensive line at this point? And he said, without skipping a beat, very confident. Now, he's not going to say anything else. He's very confident. We'll talk about Andrus Peat a little bit later in the show when we get done with Derek. But, like, that's the key to this whole thing for me, is Derek Carr is the one player they have to keep healthy. They have no experience behind him, at least no relevant experience. I mean, Nathan Peterman, he even makes the team, is like, that's not who you want playing. They've got to keep him healthy. And they've got to keep him upright. And that's really the key to this whole thing. I don't care what your scheme is. I don't care how well Derek does or doesn't play if you don't have that.
Yeah. I mean, that goes with literally any offense. Right?
Sure.
But, like, yeah, I mean, it's so important. I think, like, especially that early part of the year when he was really struggling and then kind of going through a couple of those injuries, the shoulder at Green Bay, the concussion in Minnesota, a lot of those problems were born out of the offensive line struggling to protect him. Not even getting into the failures they had as a running game, because those were multiple. Keeping Derek Carr upright and at least giving him some time to go through the progressions. I mean, when they were not doing that, they were a terrible offense. They finished the year pretty well offensively. I think like 9th in scoring and some like 10th or 11th in total offense. But, like, you can't look at those overall numbers and be like, yes, that's what they were, because, like, for huge stretches of the year, they were so bad at just giving him the time to make a play. And Derek, I think, was also playing into that a little bit, holding onto the ball too long at times. His passer rating was, like, so much different when he was getting rid of the ball in under 2.5 seconds versus over. So, yeah, I mean, it is absolutely paramount for them not to have a repeat of the first 8 weeks of last season, when he was just like constantly harassed by pass rushers. Can they do that? Very much remains to be seen. I mean, as of right now, I think Trevor Penning's their starting left tackle, and he's a massive question mark, even if they're confident in him and he's finally got a full offseason. Like, he's never done it at the professional level. Their left guard, I guess, Oli Udoh, who has played 134 snaps the last 2 years offensively. Yeah, I think you feel pretty good about the center to right side, assuming Tali Fuanga is your right tackle. But, like, I mean, I don't know. Nobody knows what it's going to look like, and I think it's still not a guarantee that this is their offensive line they're going to be taking into the season.
Yeah, he sold the fact that they were confident, but that's because part of being an NFL quarterback is being a salesperson, being an actor, and I mean, there's no way he's confident in that thing right now.
I mean, I think part of the reason he said that is because he thinks the new scheme and what they want out of their offensive lineman fits the personnel they have in the building. But, like, at the same time, I mean, there's not a high level of proof that those guys can do it, even if they've been playing in a different scheme under a different coach. You want proven guys. There's a chance they can turn those guys into something really good, but, like, there's also a chance that they could be just what they are.
Yeah. Dunk, you have a level of confidence in the offensive line, 1 to 10?
No, I mean, look, this is the time of year when everybody's optimistic. I mean, I'm reading stuff out of Carolina's camp, where they're talking the same way. I mean, this is what happens. The proof's going to be in the pudding when they get out there on the field against a good team, and they play the Kansas City Chiefs in Arrowhead Stadium, and that place is rocking, and it's 3rd and 8. I mean, can you make a play? I mean, can they protect him with this, Spagnuolo defense throwing different looks at him? Can they get the right check at the line to get in the right protection? That was a big problem last year. If you remember, there's all kinds of communication issues. I mean, that had nothing to do with health. That had to do with somebody wasn't getting in the right protection. Those are the things that I think the offensive coordinating was insufficient a year ago. Hopefully this coaching staff is better at that, because I do think, along with Derek Carr's early player in the year not being up to standard, a lot of it had to do with just holding people accountable and guys doing their jobs and beyond just the physical ability of the players. But I mean, like Luke said, you're going into this year right now with 3 question marks out of 5, in my opinion, up front. And I think that's a big concern.
Yeah. A couple other things that Derek and I talked about. One was the quarterback room, where he's got, is it 6 quarterbacks or 7 if you count Taysom, or 6
counting Taysom?
6 if you count Taysom. Okay. Obviously, they're not going to go into the season with that many, but the point remains, and they draft Spencer Rattler and asked Derek about that, and he said, look, I'm 33. I'm aware I'm not going to play forever. They're going to need my replacement, and they're searching for my replacement. He seemed totally fine with that, which I think is a mature way to look at it. Matt, I don't know if he actually means that or if he'd rather have had another offensive lineman in that spot. But the fact of the matter is they do need a backup quarterback.
Sure, and it's easier to say that when the guy that they draft is a 5th-round pick rather than the 8th overall pick.
Yes.
With Atlanta.
Wasn't in the first round.
It was, going back to the expectations things, if they had taken one higher in the first round, then his attitude may have been a little different. But they did need one. We've talked about Spencer Rattler before on the show. I think it was a really interesting pick. The upside, I think, is there. But
Rhymes with pick. Sorry.
as the other guys, as far as the other guys, Nathan Peterman, I get he's worked with Carr. He's been in this offense. Kellen Mond is the one that's a little interesting to me in terms of if you told me they would release him tomorrow, I don't think he seems like just a camp arm and someone to kind of bring along and help install this offense. But yeah, they're not going to keep 5 of these guys, and it'll be interesting to see. Do they keep 3 depending on what happens with Haener and Rattler, who wins the backup job there? That's the competition that I'm really interested in. Peterman and Mond, sure.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they almost have to keep 3 if they want to.
Yeah.
If they want to keep developing Haener and Rattler, and just see what they turn into. Because I do think that Haener showed enough last year in camp specifically to warrant a longer look at him. Obviously, we'll see what happens this year, but I don't think you want to expose either of those guys to waivers to try to sneak them onto the practice squad. But Mond and Peterman very much feel, and Derek even kind of alluded to this a little bit, they have some experience in this type of system, which is I think a good thing when you're talking about doing offensive install of a new offensive scheme. You got guys who've done it before that can kind of show you a little bit of the ropes on it. But I fully anticipate neither of those guys being on the 53-man roster unless they just go absolutely ham in the preseason and training camp, which is very unexpected.
Yes. I think you got to skew toward keeping the younger guys to see what you
have to. You invested a 4th-round pick in Haener, and not only that, but you traded a future 4th in order to go get him. So really, I mean, it's 2 picks. And then you have a 5th in Rattler, who you're not going to do anything with him this year. Unless he's just an abject disaster, which nobody anticipates that to happen. You picked him to develop him. So I can't see a scenario. I mean, it feels highly unlikely that either of those 2 guys are cut to open up the waiver process with them. It just feels like both are going to be a part of this team moving forward. It's just a matter of which one is going to be number 2 on the depth chart. And it might be neither. I mean, Taysom Hill might just be the de facto number 2, and you got 2 developmental ones behind.
That's the beauty of having Taysom Hill on the roster.
Yeah.
I mean, if something happens, I bet he would go into the game, especially early in the year. But I do think it's going to be one of the more fun things to watch during camp.
I agree.
Watching the backup quarterback competition. I mean, we haven't really had that because Jameis was locked in for sure.
Yeah.
Dalton, that those guys, we knew who they were. This is almost feels wide open to me. How they divvy up the reps is going to be interesting. And I do think both those guys, Haener and Rattler, have a lot of the traits that you see in this offensive system. I mean, they talk about using bootlegs and functional mobility from the quarterback. Both those guys fit what I think they look for in a quarterback. So I think it makes a lot of sense. Both those guys, I'll be shocked if they're not on the roster to some capacity.
Yeah, I'm really actually kind of excited to see Haener in this offense just because one of his strengths coming out of Fresno is his processing, which I feel like is, when you're thinking about what made some of those San Francisco quarterbacks really good is that they're high-level processors. Like Brock Purdy is a high-level processor. It's like his whole thing. So I'm interested to see how Haener fits within this scheme, where like Rattler might be the more talented player, with the big arm and the ability to make all the throws, whatever the cliches are. But I think Haener is a really interesting fit for this offense. Maybe he's not quite there in terms of like full NFL ready attributes, but like if he's processing things quickly, he can function this thing.
Yeah, and he's one of these guys, if you talk to him, I mean, he is not lacking in confidence.
Nope.
I mean, he's probably reveling in the fact that they brought in Rattler. I guarantee he's probably, breaking down the playbook. I mean, I know they are. That's what they're doing right now in the install, but he's probably loving that, just knowing how he's wired. And I agree with Luke. I think he fits. I mean, he's a lot like Purdy in a lot of ways. So
sounds like we need a full pod on the backup quarterback race at some point this summer.
It'd be our least listened to pod.
Yeah, I don't know,
Hey,
man.
people love them some backups.
People do love backup quarterbacks. By the way,
Let's do a full Nathan Peterman.
Yeah, all right.
I asked Derek Carr about Kirk Cousins' situation and the Falcons drafting Michael Penix 8th overall, as you alluded to, Matt. And he, he said, he kind of chuckled and said, well, it doesn't really affect Kirk this year, but I do think if I were him, I'd wonder why didn't we go get a lineman or a receiver or a back instead and help me this year instead of planning for 2, 3, 4 years down the road. And to me, that's the most fair question of all. Like, yeah, sure, you can plan for the future with Michael Penix, but are you so sure that you're going to be that good this year that you didn't need anything else?
Yeah, I mean, like there's a little off topic here, but I do think that there is some. The whole Albert Breer thing, where he's going back to Terry Fontenot's experience here in New Orleans, and their experience with having Mahomes kind of plucked out from in front of them, even if they never would have drafted, like if Lattimore and Mahomes were there, they would have taken Lattimore anyways. Like that experience of like being so close to like maybe pulling the trigger on a guy and then seeing the guy become like the next big thing. I get it to a degree where you say like, look, we are really, really sold on this guy. We think he's going to be a great pro. Like we can't pass up on the opportunity. I see that, but like it just does not align with anything else they did this offseason. And like I would be absolutely livid if I was Kirk Cousins, because like he's got only so many years of football left, and he went to a place where he thinks he's going to build this thing up and win there, and they're not adding to it.
I just hope the Netflix cameras were around, man.
And he left Minnesota because they told him, yeah, we're probably going to draft a quarterback, and he didn't want to be part of that. And
yeah, that's pretty bad. Okay, one more thing that Derek mentioned before we move on, and that's I did ask him about Michael Thomas in that situation, and I don't, these are all things he said before, so I don't want to make a huge deal about it, but he did basically say like, yeah, like Mike called me out publicly. Every time he did, I called him one-on-one and hashed it out. I think Derek said, I'm a man, and I handled it man-to-man. He also said those things are not conducive for building a team. Did not sound like a guy. Now, he also praised Mike in some ways and said he's competitive and he's fiery, and that's where a lot of this comes from. But it is very clear that Derek is not sorry that Michael Thomas will not be a part of the 2024 Saints.
Yeah. I mean,
we're not breaking news here.
Yeah, look, I know there's like a lot of people who are very loyal to Mike because of what he did here in his time, and people are going to side with him because he was a great player, one of the best players in franchise history. But like, it is inarguable that like if you got a very high profile player on your team who's not contributing because he's hurt, like he's been hurt for the last 4 years, and he's spouting off on social media, that is not good for the team. Like I don't think Derek should be criticized for that.
Yeah.
It's like obvious. You got a star receiver who's going out and throwing everybody under the bus on Twitter, including the executives in the organization, the head coach,
people on this podcast.
Garden instrument over here.
that's putting it nicely.
I mean, it's like, yeah, it's terrible. It's a terrible look. Like, if you're not going to be a part of this, get out.
Yeah. There's nothing controversial about what Derek said.
But people are going to take it for. I don't know for sure. I haven't seen the reaction and everything online, but people do like to jump on what he says, and I want to get out ahead of it a little bit. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, because what Mike did was, I think if you're a football player and part of a locker room, it's inexcusable.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the repeatedness of it. It's one thing to maybe live tweet during a game and you're hurt like a week after and you're still salty about that. Continued after the season. Like when their season was done,
He
was still
tripled down.
yeah. And that just, good luck to Mike Thomas. But, I mean, we don't know where he's at health-wise, but he's also not signed right now. Be interested to see if anyone picks him up.
Oh, he'll land somewhere, I'm sure. I mean, I don't think he's just going to go.
Somebody will take a chance on him.
Yeah.
There's one thing. I mean, we were talking before we went on air about it, that has always kind of bothered me a little bit. Is everyone wants to couch Mike? And look, he is definitely a competitive guy. There's no doubt. I mean, we've seen that. It's one of his strengths. But couching that and trying to frame it as he's just competitive. I mean, every player in an NFL locker room is competitive. You don't get to that level without having competitiveness in your DNA. I mean, everyone's competitive. And within that team framework, you have to be able to function. I mean, the Saints wear those T-shirts, the big, team and the little me, that was their mantra. And it's the exact opposite with Mike Thomas. It always has been. And you can't have that and try to build a functional locker room, especially when you're Mike Thomas and you're the veteran player in your position group. I know Mickey Loomis and the staff, that's one of the things that they do. They always seed a veteran guy that's basically the leader of each position group. You can just go down the list. You can see him. It's Cam Jordan, it's Mario Davis, Ty Matthew, and that was going to be Mike Thomas. And he was on board with that early on. He was doing all the right things. And then, he went off the rails. You can't do that and be expected to be a leader of your position group. You can't have that filtering down to the rest of the younger players. And I think that's why he's not here anymore, because of that. And I think the organization and the leadership said, we've got to get someone else in there leading Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed and this young receiving corps has a lot of potential.
Yeah. Derek, by the way, very effusive in praise of Chris Olave. Thinks he could be in line for a huge season, so we'll see. Okay, so you can read that whole, I don't know if I'll post the whole interview or just most of it online, probably Friday, maybe even tomorrow. So check that out on NOLA.com as soon as I can get through it. In the meantime, a couple other pieces of news before we go, guys. Andrus Peat signs with the Las Vegas Raiders. Again, we talked about the offensive line. I mean, at this point, we just don't know who that left tackle is going to be, and that happens to be one of the most important spots on a depth chart.
Yeah, I'd say so. I'll tell you what. I mean, I'm starting to sound a little like Luke here. I'm getting excited. I mean, I'm actually looking forward to this training camp because of this new offense. All the position battles we're gonna. There's how many times we've come in to a Saints season where it felt like everything was locked up. That's not the case this year, especially on offense. I think there's going to be a lot of competition. It's just going to be a little more stimulating to see, can this offense take over and make some of these players that we thought might not be playing up to their capabilities. Derek Carr, Penning. We haven't really spent a lot of time talking about the running game and Alvin Kamara. I mean, I think this is a huge year for him long term with the organization. Can they get him back on track? I mean, his numbers fell off a cliff the last 2 years. Can they get something out of Kendre Miller? There's just a lot to look forward to this offseason and then leading up to training camp.
I think it's telling that they didn't touch Alvin's contract this offseason. I mean, he's already got like a huge cap hit next year. If you start pushing even more into next year, then you're talking about like a cap hit of north of $30 million for a running back who's approaching his 30th birthday. But yeah, I think it is like, I agree. I think it's a big year for him because it's been, for various reasons, for injury and suspension and poor offensive line play in front of him, poor quarterback play. I mean, it's been 3 years since he's been like the guy.
Yeah,
that's like really carried this offense. I think it's still there. You can see glimpses of it. I know you and I kind of disagree on this a little bit, but maybe he's not going to be the guy who averaged 7 yards a carry like he did as a rookie. But like I think he can still be a really, really good, important player in this offense. But they've got to unlock him, and I think that starts with the offensive line play, and frankly, it kind of ends with Derek Carr. Like, is he able to play at a high level to make defenses kind of take their eyes off of Alvin a little bit? And let him kind of go back to being a player who does like amazing things in space. I mean, we'll see.
There was a game last year they played in Atlanta. If you're out there, go back if you've got the all 22 and watch where they blocked it up beautifully on the offensive line, and he was one-on-one with the safety 2 times and got tackled. And I think the younger Alvin Kamara makes those guys miss and ends up with more than 17 yards, which was his. There's a reason he only had a run of 17 yards. It's plays like that where they actually did block it up, and he couldn't make the guy miss. That's going to be what I think Alvin Kamara is working on this all offseason, trying to get maybe lighter. You know, as you get older, you got to get a little bit lighter. And we saw that worked actually with Mark Ingram. Mark Ingram had a couple years late in his career around this age where he got a little bit lighter and really had some effective years. But I think in addition to Alvin, they've got to get Kendre Miller going. I mean, they've got to have a big year from him because we've seen now that Alvin can't be that workhorse back anymore with the amount of touches he was using early in his career.
Yeah, and they got to get a little bit more than 2.1 yards per carry out of Jamal Williams. I
don't know if that's going to happen.
I mean,
I guess in the new
he was a
scheme.
1,000-yard rusher in Detroit.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
16 touchdowns or something. We talk about the pass blocking, but the run blocking has been maybe an even bigger problem. And they could use another guard too, man. I mean, Udo is not a proven commodity. As I don't even say his name.
Counting
right.
out Nick
Udo.
Ollie Udo.
Nick Saldivari. We count him.
well, the thing is, like, nobody knows what the hell he is because he never got on the field last year, and that's part of it. I think when you're using a mid-round pick on a guy you have high hopes for, you're kind of giving him a red shirt year. I think even though he's a 7th-round pick this year, I think Josiah Aziram is kind of a similar case where, he's got a lot of traits that you really like, but like it's probably going to be a year or 2, if he makes it before he's really an impact player on the team. Maybe Saldivari, maybe they have something there, but it's just impossible to know by now because he's never been on the field.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question mark.
I think that's what's so important about the spring and training camp is you've just got to find your 5. Like, that's going back to the Derek Carr discussion. One of the reasons he started playing much better is because they found that continuity along the offensive line. They sat Trevor Penning. Pete went to left tackle. They kept James Hurst at left guard. They could have been easily tempted to put Hurst back at tackle and put Pete at guard, but they didn't want to affect 2 spots like in the middle of the season like that. So just being able to find those 5, that best fit, and I think we'll see a lot of combinations during training camp of one day Ollie Udo might be at left tackle, the other day he might be at right guard, and Cesar Ruiz, can he play left guard? Like, I don't necessarily know. Like, just because Ruiz has been on the right side, maybe they try him on the left. Like, I just think there's going to be a lot of experimentation, and the big one too is, do they try Trevor Penning at guard? But it doesn't seem like they want to do that for whatever reason.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe if I think it's still a possibility they sign a tackle and see what Penning has there.
Well, another thing they could do that we haven't really talked about is they could move Fuaga to the left tackle and have Landon Young be the right tackle, or someone else be
right,
like assuming Ramczyk.
Yeah, and I'd be interested to see that. Young started, I think, 7 games in his time with the Saints. He's dealt with some injuries, but he's been okay.
Yeah,
he's been a good swing tackle. But he's had issues with like kind of the premier athletes on the outside whenever he's been kind of pushed into the starting lineup. But I don't think that's a bad idea just to try and see how it works, and how it works with this new offensive scheme. So they have options, but I think that the problem is that all those options are really, really unproven, including Fuanga. And then on top of that, the depth behind them is also really untested and unproven. And as we've seen, just pick a year. They've had to have 7-8 different offensive line combinations.
Yeah, you're not getting through the season playing only 5 or 6 linemen. That's not happening.
5 guys playing
NFL season.
900 snaps apiece is not happening.
Next phase of the offseason starts this weekend with rookie minicamp. Then we have 3 weekends of OTAs and then mandatory minicamp in June. So let's talk a little rookie minicamp. What we're watching out for. Obviously, Fuanga is going to be in a Saints uniform for the first time. Kool-Aid McKinstry. I think maybe the most visible guy will be Spencer Rattler, as we mentioned. We get to see him throw the ball for the first time, kind of see what he's got. But what are you guys looking out for?
Matt, you want to start off?
Yeah, I guess Rattler, that connection with Bub Means, see if he has anything there. It's really hard for rookie minicamp to kind of gauge where these guys are at. A lot of times teams will invite, I don't know if the Saints do this, but a lot of times teams will invite like kind of veterans to be part of rookie minicamp. Wonder who will show up there, if anyone notable is trying to resurrect their career. I saw Jarvis Landry was somewhere. Jaguars, I think. So we'll see, but there's not too much to take from it. But anytime he's a rookie quarterback, he gets most of the attention.
I think that's what they did last year, right? Didn't they bring in like Kiki Kote and those guys during this period of time in the offseason? I remember something similar to that.
Rookie minicamp, or was it
just regular minicamp?
Yeah, I think it might have just been regular minicamp. They brought in a bunch of those receivers.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I think they signed Edwards separately, but you're right. I mean,
Kiki Kuti was Edwards. I think James Washington.
Yeah. I could see that definitely happen, and some offensive linemen.
Yeah,
as well.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even remember. Every year, I'm reminded that I remember literally nothing from rookie minicamp.
Yeah.
So I don't even know if they're going to even line up in offensive formations. But I would be interested to see if they just try to do a little cross training with Fumaga, and is he right? Is he left? Does that even matter at this stage of the game? I'm definitely, like you guys, looking forward to seeing Spencer Rattler throw the ball. And I guess there may be a chance we see some maybe some second-year players out there too. And maybe Jake Hayner's out there. Looking forward to seeing some of the undrafted free agents.
It's Saldivari. You mentioned Saldivari.
Yeah, Saldivari might be out there. I think some of these undrafted free agents are really interesting. And I remember some of them, they're really fascinating when you're just reading the bios. I remember last year they had a guy from one of the Ivy League schools, and he ran a 4.3 something at his pro day. I was like, oh man, okay, interesting. And then he got out there and maybe a 4.7 guy, and I was just like, oh, that was just BS. So
timing error.
I'm interested to see Kyle Sheets, of Slippery Rock, who's a big guy, ran a pretty decent 40, but maybe that's just a bunch of smoke and there's nothing there. I don't know. Maybe there is. Oh, it's an exciting time that I'm probably going to completely forget this time next year.
I think a little different way of looking at it, I'm sure you all are going to be doing the exact same thing, is I want to see the new staff, how they work.
Yeah.
What are they? Are they yellers, high energy guys? Are they more
Clint Kubiak seems like a high energy yeller kind of guy, right?
Yeah. I mean, is he different on the field?
That's why he's so reserved.
You just never know. You never know. I remember Sean Payton wasn't that way in practice. I mean, he was kind of more of a teacher, kind of quiet. I mean, every once in a while he'd bark out, but we all saw, game day Sean on the sidelines during games. He was crazy. And Greg Williams, the exact opposite. Greg Williams during practice was, very vocal, very animated, enthusiastic. And then he used to always say, during games, I want my players to be the ones. I need to calm them down. I want them playing right on the edge. So he was different on game days. I'm interested to see how they coach with this new staff. Maybe we do get some glimpses of the new offensive scheme if they do some stuff. So those are the things more so than the players, other than looking at them on the hoof and seeing what they look like. Are they as big, like Luke said, as they're purported to be? It always cracked me up, these all the way back to high school days with people fudging on their size. And so, I mean, it's going to come out.
Yeah.
I think just
don't look at my driver's license.
Yeah. Well, I saw somebody getting interviewed the other day. I can't remember who it was, but they were interviewing him, one of these draft prospects, and they said, aren't you 6'6"? He goes, yeah. And then I looked in the Beast, which has the exact combine measurements, and the guy's a little over 5'11".
Yeah, I think Xavier Leggett was listed at 6'4" at South Carolina. He measured it at 6'1" at the combine.
Right. Yeah. It's going to come out. You're going to get measured.
Down, you can't tell how short I am.
The best sports anecdote for this is Kevin Durant not wanting to be 7 feet. He's 7 feet for the ladies, but for his NBA height, he's 6'10". So
because he doesn't want to be 7 feet and 175.
Yeah.
Looks bad. The other thing I had on the calendar, guys, is the schedule release. It's come out. That'll be next Wednesday. Originally, we thought that was going to be tomorrow, and we were going to talk a lot about that today.
Wish it would be tomorrow.
Yeah, I do too.
It would be perfect.
Just get it out.
I mean, sooner or later, the NFL is going to be like, oh, you know what? There's nothing going on in June outside of some mini camps. So wait. There's actually nothing going on in July.
We're going to own 4th of July weekend.
Why don't we release it in July?
Don't give them any ideas.
I'm never going to go on vacation again.
Worse, I could see them going, we're going to release 1 week of a season each day and dominate half a month.
How much more money does the NFL need?
All of
keep
it.
finding blood in the turnip.
Anyway, it'll be Wednesday. We'll find out the Saints schedule. We'll talk about, I don't know what our pod schedule is exactly for next week, but we'll have reaction. We may even have a preview. Matt, you had a fun mock schedule that you put out. And just because we haven't mentioned it yet, who did you have the Saints playing first in this schedule?
We haven't met this.
Oh,
I
yeah,
had them
that's true.
playing Washington.
Washington
Yes.
Commanders.
Our streak was
That
dying.
was-
A ninth inning base hit to keep the streak alive here.
Yeah, because Robert Griffin 12 years ago played his first electric game, number 2 overall pick, lit up the Saints in the dome. The Commanders drafted Jaden Daniels. LSU makes a lot of sense for that first round. Mock schedules are a big thing in Washington as well, and I've noticed that's also a popular pick for.
Interesting. Who would
Kevin
get a bigger?
Sh- yeah.
Who would get a bigger ovation, Jaden Daniels or Derek Carr?
For Jaden Daniels.
Come
but,
on. Come on.
It's a
Well,
fair
if you
question.
remember,
Oh.
if you remember, and I'm not sure if this ever did it ever get public or not, but one of the things the Saints organization did is they tried to play that game against the Bengals with Joe Burrow in Europe. They wanted to play that game in London because if they were going to have to give up a home game, they wanted to give that one up because they knew
How many LSU fans would?
so many
yeah.
of their season ticket holders would
Sure.
sell on the secondary market. So they figured they would. And I remember a lot of fans were like, "Oh, the NFL is going to screw." But actually, the Saints wanted that to happen. Just a little insight.
I guess we don't know for 100% sure the Saints don't have a Europe game. Carolina, I think, is the one team hosting.
Yeah, they're
that.
not gonna. They're not.
But
gonna
I
I
don't
don't think so.
think
I
they
think
can
maybe
Europe.
next year be back in the rotation.
Yeah.
I need to update my passport if that's the case.
Yeah. So we will find out next week. We will talk to you all about it. And until then, enjoy all the content on NOLA.com and on the social media channels. We'll have the next Saints Insider. Subscribe to the Saints on NOLA.com YouTube page if you haven't already and sign up for notifications. For our producer, Norman Bell, that's Matthew Paris, Luke Johnson, and Jeff Duncan. I'm Zach Ewing. We'll see you next time.
Go check out Duncan's book.